I'm Jack, 35, male, and in 1 hour I'm going to interview my own uncle, the man who skipped my wedding because he was busy with real family for a job at my company. The irony is so thick I could cut it with a knife. For 10 years, that phrase has been a splinter in my mind, a constant reminder of a deep and casual cruelty that reshaped my understanding of family. Now his resume is on my screen, a monument to a life that has clearly taken a downturn, and I have the power to decide his professional future. The boy he once dismissed is now the man he has to impress. The name on the application was Robert Miller. To the HR system, he was just another candidate, a 62-year-old man with a long but spotty career in regional sales. To me, he was Uncle Rob, the cool uncle, the one who felt like a celebrity every time he visited. Growing up, my world was small and simple. My dad, David, was a quiet, hardworking accountant. He was reliable, kind, and as steady as a rock, but he lacked a certain spark. Uncle Rob, his older brother, was the opposite. He was the family's shooting star. He worked in sales for a big corporation, wore sharp suits, drove a new car every couple of years, and had a booming laugh that filled every room. When he and my dad stood side by side, my dad seemed to fade into the background, a black and white photo next to a vibrant oil painting. I adored him. When I was 10, he came for Christmas and pulled a small, felt-lined box from his coat pocket. Inside was a silver watch, its face clean and bright. It was my first real watch, not one of the plastic digital ones my friends had. For my number one champ, he'd said, ruffling my hair, a man's gotta know his time. I wore that watch until the band frayed and the battery died. Champ, that was his name for me. It made me feel special, seen by the most important man I knew. He'd ask about my little league games, tossing a baseball with me in the backyard with an ease my own father never managed. My dad would watch from the porch smiling, but there was always a flicker of something else in his eyes, resignation maybe. He couldn't compete with his brother's charisma, and he knew it. Looking back, the signs of his dismissive nature were always there, hidden in plain sight. I was just too young and starstruck to see them. Family gatherings were Uncle Rob's stage. He'd hold court at the dinner table, telling grand stories about closing a huge deal or meeting some minor celebrity on a business trip. My own father's accomplishments, like helping a small business avoid bankruptcy or receiving a commendation for perfect attendance at his firm, were treated like quaint little anecdotes. I remember one Thanksgiving distinctly. I was about 14. My dad had just finished explaining a complex tax issue he'd solved for a client, a story he was genuinely proud of. When he finished, there was a polite pause, and then Uncle Rob laughed. "Good old David," he said, patting my dad on the shoulder. "Keeping the world's ledgers in order. Meanwhile, I just closed a deal that's going to put our product in every major retail store in the Midwest. We're celebrating with a trip to Hawaii. You should see the resort, Jackie boy," he said, turning his attention to me. "Infinity pool overlooking the ocean." He didn't just share his success, he used it as a cudgel to diminish my father's. He made my dad's stable, honorable life seem small and gray, and my dad just took it. He'd offer a tight smile and say, "That's great, Rob, really great." The unspoken rule was that Rob was the success and Dad was, well, Dad was just Dad. The favoritism extended to his own family, of course. Uncle Rob had a son, Mark, who was a few years older than me. Mark was the embodiment of everything Rob valued. He was the captain of his high school football team, got a business degree from a prestigious university, and went straight into a high-powered finance job. He was, in Rob's eyes, the real family legacy. My achievements, making honor roll, winning a state-level science fair, getting a scholarship to a good but not great university, were met with a condescending, "Aita boy champ." It was like a pat on the head for the family dog. Mark got heartfelt speeches about making the family proud. I got a nickname. I never held it against Mark. He was a decent enough guy, though we were never close. The problem was never him. It was the clear, unstated hierarchy my uncle had built in his own mind. There was his family, the A-team, the winners, and then there was his brother's family, the B-team, the nice but unimportant relatives you see on holidays. I was too naive to understand the sting of it back then. I just accepted it as the natural order of things. Rob was the sun, and we were just minor planets orbiting him, happy to catch a little of his light and warmth. The watch he gave me felt like a symbol of his affection, a sign that even if I wasn't Mark, I was still his champ. It wasn't. Until the most important day of my adult life that I learned how little that title, and that watch, truly meant. 10 years ago, I was 25 and about to marry the love of my life, Chloe. We'd met in college, two ambitious kids with big dreams and small bank accounts. After graduation, we moved into a tiny apartment and started building our lives. I was working at a small tech firm, learning the ropes of software development, and Chloe was a junior graphic designer. We were pouring every spare moment and dollar into our own secret project. A startup idea for a project management tool that we were convinced could revolutionize the industry. Our life was a whirlwind of late nights, cheap takeout, and shared dreams whispered in the dark. Chloe was my partner in every sense of the word. She understood my ambition because she shared it. She also understood my family dynamics in a way I was only just beginning to grasp. "Your uncle is a lot," she said once after a particularly trying Christmas dinner. We were driving home, and I was still buzzing from the mixture of holiday cheer and low-grade family tension. "He's just confident," I defended, a reflex honed over 2 decades. "There's a difference between confidence and arrogance, Jack," she said gently. "The way he talks down to your dad, it's not right, and he looks at you like you're still a 10-year-old kid he has to entertain." Her words were a pinprick to my inflated perception of my uncle. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't deny it either. She saw the hierarchy clearly because she wasn't raised in it. To her, my dad was a wonderful, kind man, and my uncle was a showboat who hogged the spotlight. When we decided to get married, we knew we wanted a small, meaningful ceremony. We didn't have the money for a lavish affair, and honestly, we didn't want one. We wanted to be surrounded by the people who truly loved and supported us. My guest list was short: my parents, a few close friends, and of course, Uncle Rob and his family. In my mind, despite Chloe's reservations, his presence was non-negotiable. He was my hero, the man who called me champ. How could he not be there? I remember calling him to share the good news. It was a Tuesday evening. I was nervous, pacing around our small living room while Chloe gave me a thumbs up from the couch. "Uncle Rob, it's Jack," I said when he answered. "Jackie boy, how's the world treating you? Still tinkering with those computer things?" he asked, his voice slick with his usual casual condescension. "It's going great, actually, but that's not why I'm calling. I have some big news. Chloe and I are getting married." There was a pause on the line. It wasn't a happy, shocked pause. It was a flat, processing pause. "Married? Wow, you kids are growing up fast. Who's the lucky girl again?" "Chloe," I said, my voice tightening. He'd met her at least 5 times. "We've been together for 4 years." Right, Chloe the artist," he said, as if that explained everything. "Well, that's something. When's the big day?" I gave him the date and told him an official invitation would be in the mail. His response was lukewarm at best. "All right, we'll see. Things are crazy over here. Mark is up for a big promotion, you know. We might be celebrating that around the same time, but send the invite and we'll check the calendar." He didn't say congratulations, not once. I hung up the phone feeling deflated. Chloe saw it on my face immediately. "What did he say?" "He said he'd check his calendar," I mumbled. "Jack, honey," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "You can't keep seeking his approval. You're a grown man, you're building a company, you don't need his validation." She was right, but the 10-year-old boy inside me still wanted his hero to be proud of him. We sent out the invitations a week later. They were beautiful, designed by Chloe herself with a simple, elegant script on thick cardstock. We included a stamped, self-addressed envelope for the RSVP. Most of them came back within 2 weeks, a cascade of happy will attend checkboxes, but the one from my uncle's address never arrived. A month before the wedding, my mom called. "Jack, honey, have you heard from your uncle?" "No, I haven't gotten his RSVP back," I admitted, a knot forming in my stomach. "Your father called him," she said, her voice strained. "Rob said they were swamped and he wasn't sure they could get away. He said Mark's job was really demanding." It was a flimsy excuse, and we all knew it. My wedding was on a Saturday. Even the busiest person could spare a single day for their nephew's wedding. It was a clear signal, a soft dismissal that felt more insulting than an outright no. My dad was deeply embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Jack," he told me over the phone. "He gets like this. He's always been competitive. You getting married, starting your life, maybe it makes him feel old." It was a weak attempt to explain away his brother's behavior, and it did little to soothe the growing hurt. The man who had set the bar for success in my life couldn't be bothered to witness one of my most important milestones. The message was clear. My life, my marriage, my happiness. It was all a B-list event in the grand, important world of Uncle Rob. Our wedding day arrived on a perfect Saturday in early October. The air was crisp, and the autumn leaves were a riot of red and gold. We'd chosen a small, rustic venue with an old barn and a sprawling apple orchard. It was everything we dreamed of: intimate, personal, and a world away from the kind of flashy, ostentatious event Uncle Rob would have thrown. Despite the cloud of his absence, the day started with a sense of pure magic. Chloe looked breathtaking. Seeing her walk down the aisle towards me, her eyes locked on mine, was a moment of such profound joy that it momentarily erased every worry from my mind. In that moment, nothing else mattered. We said our vows, our voices steady, promising to be each other's partners, supporters, and best friends. We were a team ready to take on the world together. During the ceremony, I couldn't help but scan the small crowd of smiling faces. My parents were in the front row, my mom dabbing her eyes with a tissue, my dad watching with a look of quiet, immense pride. Our closest friends were there, cheering us on. But the seat next to my father, where my uncle should have been, was conspicuously empty. It was a small, dark hole in an otherwise perfect picture. At the reception in the barn, the joy returned. The space was filled with twinkling lights, the scent of apple cider, and the sound of laughter. We danced, we ate, we toasted to our future. For a few hours, I managed to push the thought of my uncle out of my mind. He chose not to be here. It was his loss, not mine. I had Chloe, I had my parents, I had my friends. That was my real family. It was during my dad's speech that the wound was ripped open again. He spoke beautifully about my childhood, about the man I'd become, and about how happy he was to welcome Chloe into our family. Then he faltered. I also want to apologize for my brother Rob, he began, and the mood in the room shifted. He wanted to be here, but he was tied up with work. He sends his love. The lie was so transparent it was painful. Everyone knew it was an excuse. I saw the pity in the eyes of my friends and the flash of anger on Chloe's face. My dad was trying to protect his brother's image, and in doing so, he was cheapening my day. I just wanted him to stop, to let the issue die, but he was trapped by a lifetime of defending his brother's ego. A few minutes later, while talking to a friend, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I usually would have ignored it, but a strange premonition washed over me. Excusing myself, I stepped out of the barn and into the cool night air. The screen lit up with a new text message. It was from a number I knew by heart, Uncle Rob. My heart hammered in my chest. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe something had genuinely come up, a real emergency. Maybe he felt terrible and was writing to explain. I opened the message, my hope flickering for a brief second before being utterly extinguished. The text contained just 10 words that would burn themselves into my memory forever. Sorry champ, can't make it, busy with real family today. I read it once, then twice. The air left my lungs in a sudden whoosh as if I'd been punched in the gut. He'd used my special name champ and twisted it into a weapon. It wasn't a term of endearment anymore. It was a sarcastic, dismissive jab. The message was brutally clear. I was not and had never been real family. Chloe, my marriage, my new life, it was all secondary, a sideshow. His son Mark's potential promotion was a real family event. My wedding was not. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. He hadn't just declined an invitation. He had waited until the middle of my wedding reception to deliver a calculated insult. He wanted to make sure I knew my place in the hierarchy he had so carefully constructed. A wave of cold, hard anger washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. The image I'd held of him for 25 years, the cool uncle, the hero, the mentor, shattered into a million pieces. Behind the charismatic facade was a man who was petty, jealous, and cruel. He wasn't a star, he was a black hole, sucking the light and joy out of everyone around him to make himself feel bigger. I heard the barn door creak open behind me. It was Chloe. Jack, is everything okay? She asked, her smile fading as she saw the look on my face. I couldn't speak, I just held out the phone for her to read. Her eyes scanned the screen and her expression hardened. The warmth in her face was replaced by a steely resolve. She didn't say, I told you so. She didn't say anything about my uncle. She just wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. He doesn't, Adder, she whispered into my ear. Look in there, she said, nodding toward the brightly lit barn. That is your real family. We are your real family. He is nothing. I went back inside and plastered a smile on my face. I danced with my wife, I laughed with my friends, and I pushed the betrayal down into a deep, dark corner of my heart. But the damage was done. The splinter was lodged in my soul. That night I made a silent vow. I would never again seek the approval of Robert Miller. I would build a life so successful and a family so full of love that his opinion would become utterly and completely irrelevant. The day after the wedding, the text message still echoed in my mind. The hurt hadn't faded, it had sharpened into a cold, precise anger. Chloe and I packed for our modest honeymoon, a week in a rented cabin in the mountains, and we made an unspoken agreement. We would not let him ruin this. We didn't mention his name once during that week. Instead, we focused on our future. We talked for hours about our startup, sketching out plans on napkins and dreaming up features. The company, which we decided to name Nexus, became our shared project, a tangible goal to pour our energy into. In a way, my uncle's betrayal was the catalyst. It lit a fire under me. The desire to succeed was no longer just about personal ambition, it was about proving him wrong. It was about building a world where I was the one who set the terms, where my family, the one Chloe and I would create, was the only one that mattered. The first few years were a grind. We both kept our day jobs, working on Nexus during nights and weekends. We poured our savings into the company, bootstrapping everything. There were moments of doubt, times when we were so exhausted that giving up seemed like the only sane option. But whenever my motivation wavered, I would think of that text message. Busy with real family. It was like a shot of adrenaline. It reminded me what I was fighting against. The casual cruelty of people who judge your worth based on their own narrow, selfish criteria. 2 years after our wedding, we launched the first version of our software. It was a modest success, enough for me to quit my job and focus on Nexus full-time. A year later, Chloe joined me. We were a two-person team, working out of our spare bedroom, fueled by coffee and a shared vision. During this time, my contact with Uncle Rob was non-existent. The family dynamic had been permanently altered. Family holidays became a strategic minefield. My mom would call, her voice laced with anxiety. "Rob and his family are coming for Christmas this year. I hope you and Chloe will still come. Maybe you two can talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Mom," I'd say, my voice flat. "Chloe and I will be spending Christmas with her family this year." The first time I said it, there was a stunned silence, followed by my father getting on the line. "Jack, don't let one stupid text ruin the family." "It wasn't just a text, Dad. It was a message," I replied, the anger still fresh. "He made it clear where we stand. I'm just respecting his wishes. I wouldn't want to get in the way of his real family time." My dad sighed, a sound heavy with years of resignation. "I know he was wrong, son, I do, but he's my brother. He's proud and jealous. He saw you happy starting your life and he had to lash out. It's how he's always been." "And it's how you've always let him be," I said, the words sharper than I intended. "You've spent your whole life in his shadow, letting him treat you like a second-class citizen. I'm not going to do that. Chloe and I are building our own life and it won't be governed by his ego." It was a harsh conversation, but a necessary one. A boundary had been drawn. For the next 10 years, we operated in separate orbits. If he was at a family event, we weren't. The silence between us was a vast, cold expanse. I heard snippets of his life through my parents. Mark, the golden child, got married in a lavish ceremony that my father described as over the top. Rob's company went through a series of mergers and his position became less secure. There were whispers of financial trouble, of him living beyond his means to keep up appearances. Meanwhile, Nexus grew beyond our wildest dreams. We secured venture capital funding. We moved from our spare bedroom to a small office, then to a larger one. We hired our first employee, then our 10th, then our 50th. Our software became a leader in its niche, praised for its intuitive design, a testament to Chloe's talent and its powerful functionality. By the time I turned 35, I was the CEO of a company worth millions with over 100 employees. Chloe was the chief product officer. We had two beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and a home filled with the kind of warmth and laughter I had always craved. We had built our own real family, a world away from the judgment and hierarchy of my childhood. I rarely thought about Uncle Rob anymore. The wound had scarred over. It was a part of my story, a reminder of where I came from, but it no longer had the power to hurt me. The watch he gave me sat in a dusty box in the back of my closet, a relic from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I was no longer Champ, the little boy desperate for his uncle's approval. I was Jack Miller, CEO, husband, and father. I didn't need him. And then one Tuesday afternoon, 10 years to the day after I received that fateful text, an email from my head of HR landed in my inbox. And everything changed. The email from Sarah, my head of HR, had an innocuous subject line: "Interesting candidate for senior sales role." I almost archived it without reading. I trusted Sarah implicitly. She had a knack for finding great people and had been instrumental in building our company culture, one based on respect, collaboration, and integrity. I rarely got involved in the initial screening process anymore. But something made me click it open. "Hi Jack," the email read. "We have an interesting applicant for the senior sales manager position. His name is Robert Miller. The last name caught my eye, of course. His resume seems a bit dated and he's been out of work for 6 months, but he has decades of experience at some big-name corporations. He might be a bit old school for our culture, but I thought given the name, you might want to take a look before I proceed with a standard rejection. Let me know how you want to handle it." Attached was the PDF, Robert Miller resume PDF. I stared at the name on the screen, Robert Miller. For a moment my brain refused to make the connection. Miller was a common name, it could be anyone, but my gut knew better. With a trembling hand, I clicked the attachment open. The resume loaded and there it was. His address in the same town he'd lived in for 30 years. His work history listing the very corporations he used to brag about at Thanksgiving dinners. And his summary, a sad, jargon-filled paragraph about being a results-oriented sales leader seeking a new and challenging opportunity. The man who had dismissed my life as a sideshow was now asking for a place in it. The man who was too busy for my wedding was now begging for an hour of my time. A wave of emotions washed over me, a chaotic mixture of disbelief, vindictive satisfaction, and a deep, weary sadness. The world had come full circle in the most bizarre and unexpected way. I leaned back in my chair, the sleek leather of my CEO-level seat feeling suddenly foreign. I thought of the 10-year-old boy who idolized his uncle, the 25-year-old man whose heart was broken by a text message, and the 35-year-old man I was today. It felt like all three of them were in the room with me, all staring at the same name on the screen. I forwarded the email to Chloe without any comment. Her reply came back in less than a minute. "You have got to be kidding me." That evening over dinner we talked it through. Our kids were asleep and the house was quiet. Chloe sat across from me, her expression a mixture of concern and righteous anger. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice soft. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "A part of me wants to just have Sarah send him the standard rejection form. Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates. Let him just be another number, just like he made me feel." "I wouldn't blame you if you did," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "After what he did, he deserves nothing from you." "But there's another part of me," I continued, "that feels cheated. For 10 years I've carried that insult around. I built this company on the anger and hurt he caused. He has no idea. He probably doesn't even remember sending that text. He just sees a successful company and wants a piece of it. It feels unfinished." "So you want to see him?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "I think I have to. I need to look him in the eye. I need to see the man he is now, not the giant from my childhood or the monster from my wedding day. I need to see the man who is desperate enough to apply for a job at his nephew's company." Chloe studied my face, her gaze full of love and understanding. She knew this wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about closure. It was about closing a chapter that had been left open for a decade. "Okay," she said finally. "But you have to promise me one thing. You go in there as the CEO of this company. You are in control. Don't let him make you feel like that 10-year-old boy again. Don't let him have that power over you." "I won't," I said, my voice firm with a newfound resolve. "He's not my hero anymore, he's just an applicant." The next morning I walked into Sarah's office. She looked up from her computer, a questioning look on her face. "The Robert Miller application," I said, keeping my tone even and professional. "I've reviewed his resume." "And?" she prompted. "I want to interview him," I said. Sarah's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Really? Are you sure you don't think that's awkward?" "It might be," I conceded, "but he has an interesting work history and I believe every qualified candidate deserves a chance." It was a corporate lie, but it was necessary. I couldn't explain the full story to my head of HR. "Schedule him for an interview, and Sarah," I added, pausing at her door, "I'll be conducting this one myself." She stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, Jack, whatever you think is best." As I walked back to my office, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The decision was made. The confrontation I had unknowingly been preparing for 10 years was finally going to happen. He wanted a job interview. I would give him one he would never forget. The day of the interview felt charged with a strange, electric energy. I woke up early, my mind already racing. I chose my suit carefully, a sharp, dark navy one that Chloe had bought me after we closed our first round of major funding. It was a suit that radiated success and authority. This wasn't just about looking the part, it was about feeling it. It was armor. As I drove to the office, I didn't feel nervous. I felt centered. For the first time, I felt like I was in complete control of this narrative. For 25 years, he had been the one with the power, the one who set the tone and defined the relationship. Today, the roles were reversed. He was coming into my world, my building, my office. He was playing by my rules. I arrived an hour early and walked through the office. It was a space I was immensely proud of. Open, bright, and buzzing with the collaborative energy of brilliant people working on something they cared about. It was the physical manifestation of the life Chloe and I had built, a testament to everything we had achieved in the decades since he had dismissed us. At 10:55 a.m., my assistant buzzed my office intercom. "Jack, your 11:00 appointment, Robert Miller, is here." "Thank you, Emily. Send him in 5 minutes." I stood up and walked to the large window that overlooked the city. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and turned to face the door just as it opened. Uncle Rob walked in. The 10 years since I'd last seen him had not been kind. The charismatic, confident man from my memories was gone. The man who stood before me was stooped and tired. His suit was dated, the fabric slightly shiny with age. His hair, which had been a distinguished salt and pepper, was now almost completely white and thinning on top. He carried a worn leather briefcase that looked like it had seen better decades. But the most shocking change was in his eyes. The old spark, the arrogant gleam, was gone. It had been replaced by a look of weary desperation. He looked around my spacious office, his eyes lingering on the modern furniture and the expansive view. For a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition or perhaps just confusion as he looked at me, but he quickly masked it with a practiced, professional smile. He clearly didn't place me. To him, I was just the young CEO he had to impress. "Mr. Miller, it's a pleasure," I said, not moving from behind my desk. I gestured to the chair opposite me. "Please have a seat." "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice lacking its old boom. It was thinner now, almost reedy. He sat down stiffly and placed his briefcase on his lap. "I'm Jack Miller, the CEO of Nexus," I said, watching his face for any sign of recognition. Nothing. The name Jack Miller clearly meant nothing more to him than the name on the door. The irony was staggering. For the first 20 minutes, I conducted a perfectly normal, by-the-book interview. I asked him to walk me through his resume. He spoke in tired corporate cliches about synergizing assets and leveraging core competencies. He painted a picture of a successful career, but I could see the gaps. I asked him why he left his last position. "The company was acquired," he said, avoiding my eyes. "There was a major restructuring. A lot of senior positions were eliminated. They wanted to go in a younger direction." The excuse was coated in a thin veneer of pride, but the bitterness underneath was palpable. I asked him what he knew about Nexus. He gave a rambling, generic answer about being impressed with our dynamic growth in the tech sector, something he had clearly gleaned from a 5-minute search that morning. He had no real idea what we did. Finally, I leaned forward, folding my hands on the polished surface of my desk. The professional part of the interview was over. "I have one more question for you, Robert," I said, using his full name. His head snapped up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes at my shift in tone. "It's not about sales targets or market strategy, it's about company culture. Here at Nexus, we value things like commitment, loyalty, and integrity, we believe. Is that how you treat people is everything." He nodded eagerly. Of course, I couldn't agree more. I've always prided myself on my professional relationships. "Is that so?" I said, my voice dropping slightly. "Because I have a specific scenario in mind. 10 years ago, you were invited to a very important event. A personal event for a family member, your nephew's wedding to be exact." The color drained from his face. His jaw went slack. The fog of non-recognition in his eyes cleared, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. He was finally seeing me. Not Jack Miller, CEO, but Jackie Boy, the champ. "Jack," he whispered, his voice cracking. "My God, it's you." I just stared at him, my expression unyielding. "Yes, it's me. You didn't show up to my wedding, Rob. You sent a text message instead. I imagine you've sent a lot of texts over the last decade. But do you happen to remember what that one said?" He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. He looked like a fish out of water. I don't." "Let me refresh your memory," I said, my voice cold and steady. "It said, 'Sorry champ, can't make it, busy with real family today.' Does that ring a bell?" He flinched as if I had physically struck him. The memory had clearly returned, and with it, the shame. He slumped back in his chair, the tired, professional facade completely crumbling away, revealing the broken man underneath. "Jack, I am so sorry," he stammered, his eyes pleading. I was not in a good place back then. Your father and we had some disagreements. I was proud, arrogant, stupid." "You were cruel," I corrected him, my voice devoid of emotion. "You took the most important day of my life and used it to make a petty, hurtful point. You deliberately tried to make me feel small. You wanted to remind me that I was on the B team, that my life, my marriage, was less important than whatever your real family was doing that day." Tears welled up in his eyes. "I was jealous," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Your father was so proud of you. You were young, you had your whole life ahead of you, you were marrying a wonderful girl. My own life, things weren't as great as I made them out to be. My son Mark was struggling, my career was stalling, I took it out on you. It was a monstrous thing to do, and I have regretted it ever since." I listened to his excuses, his confession. 10 years ago, this apology might have meant something. Now it just felt hollow, a desperate plea from a man who had run out of options. He wasn't apologizing because he had grown as a person. He was apologizing because he was sitting in my office asking me for a job. I let his confession hang in the silent, sunlit office. He looked down at his hands, ashamed, waiting for my verdict. The power dynamic had been so completely inverted it was almost disorienting. The giant of my childhood was now a humbled old man, his fate resting in the hands of the boy he had once so casually dismissed. For a moment I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Chloe's face when she read that text, the memory of my father's pained apology, and the memory of the cold, hard anger that had fueled me for years. Pity wasn't what this was about. This was about closure. "You say you regret it," I said finally, my voice calm. "I wonder if you'd regret it so much if you weren't sitting here today. I wonder if you would have ever apologized if your resume hadn't landed on my company's server." He had no answer for that. We both knew the truth. His regret was born of desperation, not remorse. "So here we are," I continued, leaning back in my chair. "You've applied for a senior sales manager position. You need a job, and I am the CEO of this company. I have to make a decision based on what's best for Nexus." A sliver of hope flickered in his eyes. "Jack, I can do this job. I have decades of experience. I'll be the most loyal, hardworking employee you have. I'll make it up to you, I swear." I held up a hand to stop him. "The thing is, Rob, I don't believe you. You talk about loyalty, but your actions have shown that your loyalty is conditional. You talk about commitment, but you couldn't even commit to attending your own nephew's wedding for a few hours. This company, my company, is built on trust. I trust my team to show up for each other, to support each other, and to act with integrity. How can I hire a man who has proven, in the most personal way imaginable, that he is incapable of those things when it truly matters?" The last glimmer of hope in his eyes died. He knew it was over. "I'm not doing this to be vindictive," I said, and to my surprise I realized it was true. The desire for revenge had evaporated. "I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm making a business decision. You are not a good fit for our culture. Your character, as you have demonstrated it to me, is not compatible with the values of this company." I stow. Odd up, signaling the end of the interview. "Thank you for your time, Robert. We will be in touch." He stood slowly, his body looking heavy and defeated. He picked up his worn briefcase. For a moment he just looked at me, his eyes filled with a decade's worth of unspoken words and regret. "You've done well for yourself, Jack," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your father, he was always so proud of you." "I know," I said softly. He showed up. With that he turned and walked out of my office, closing the door quietly behind him. I watched him go, feeling not a sense of triumph but a profound sense of release. The splinter that had been lodged in my soul for 10 years had finally been removed. The wound was clean. The chapter was closed. That evening I told Chloe everything. She listened patiently, then came over and wrapped me in a hug. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "You handled that with strength and grace. You didn't let him win." Later that night my dad called. His voice was hesitant. "Jack, Rob called me. He told me what happened." "Oh, he did." "Yes, he was broken. He told me he deserved it. He said you were right about everything." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, son, for not standing up to him back then, for always making excuses for him. Chloe was right. You built your own family, a better one." "It's okay, Dad," I said, and I meant it. "We're okay." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my home. Chloe was reading a story to our two kids, their laughter echoing through the house. This was my world. This was my success. This was my real family, not the one defined by blood or by the whims of a bitter old man, but the one forged in love, loyalty, and shared dreams. Uncle Rob had tried to teach me a lesson about my place in the world, but in the end, I was the one who had learned the most valuable lesson of all. You don't need the approval of those who refuse to see your worth. You just need to build a life that makes their opinion irrelevant. So what would you have done? Would you have given him the job, believing people can change? Or would you have done what I did, deciding that some actions have consequences that can't be erased?